Hi, everyone, and welcome back to our second session for today, um, where we're going to be looking at a case study from Freshworks, all about how they came across their journey to efficiency and waste reduction. So I am delighted to invite to the stage with me Abhishek Bhasin, who is the Regional OPEX Manager for HelloFresh. And what we'll go through is a couple of questions that we've had posted in around their journey to efficiency and waste reduction. Just some quick, just before we start, please do remember we have the Q&A box. So any questions that you want to pose, please do pop them in there and we'll try and answer as many as we can live. Abby's details are also in the lobby. So if you want to connect via LinkedIn, following the session, you can do as well. Hi, Beshki, how are you? Nice to have you here.
Hi, Nikki. Thanks for having me. I'm doing good. How are you?
Thanks for joining us. So just done some quick housekeeping with our audience. But did you just want to start us by giving a little bit of an overview of your time at HelloFresh and a bit of your background before we dive into some of these questions that we've already had sent in?
Sure. So, yeah, I started my HelloFresh journey back in 2021 March. I was the inventory specialist, where I took care of the inventory in our two DCs, and then worked my way up through being the warehouse manager, where I was looking end-to-end operations of a fulfillment center, right from receiving till the outbound. And after that, I was moved into this role of OPEX manager, where I was more into the process side of things, where I could, reduce waste, increase our efficiency. So I think I was best suited for this role. So here I'm talking about the same today.
No, and that's one of the reasons we wanted you to speak about with our audience today, because you've had sort of moved around a little bit and up the ladder at HelloFresh. It's really insightful for us to get your grassroots level experience and examples to sort of help our audience today on this journey to efficiency and waste reduction. So obviously with your time at HelloFresh, how do you think your organization, since you've been there, has helped to sort of cultivate a culture of continuous improvement? We've just literally had a session around continuous improvement, so I thought we'd kick off with some continuity to ask how you guys do it at HelloFresh, and have you actually had any resistance to change, and how have you kind of dealt with that?
Yeah, so I think we actually successfully fostered the culture of continuous improvement at all levels of our organization. And this was done through a lot of several key strategies. And firstly, it's with the leadership commitment, where leadership emphasizes the importance and its role in our day-to-day operations, and to stay in the market, where we are able to stay competitive and according to the market dynamics. So this started with and it's always a top-down approach, where we need to have the buy-in from our leadership, and then it goes all the way down to the associates on the floor. So when it comes to the resistance to change, I think we all have to understand that I think educating our associates on the floor is really important, and we need to explain them the importance of this change, what this change is going to enhance us with, what does this bring to their day-to-day operations, and how this is going to help them improve their production efficiency or operational efficiency by educating them, basically. So these were a few things which we did across basically the change management process, where we were allowed to spend time with our associates and have them talk about what they are seeing. And we also had a Kaizen form where we asked the associates to fill in that form with any changes they would like to see or any ideas they might have, which we go back and work with them to see, okay, if this idea is really worth the money or worth the percentage of operational efficiency, then probably yes, this is something which we can venture out and work with them, so that they also feel that they're included and part of this project journey. So yeah, I mean, it's been pretty good, and I think we have come a long way from where we were, and I think yeah, we've been doing well in this department of change management.
That's really interesting, actually, because for the agenda of this content series, we've got quite a few sessions around breaking down silos and cross-team collaboration and employee culture. So it's really interesting that you've actually been doing that at HelloFresh. And I think it ties in with a lot of the challenges that people today are experiencing. Was there anything in particular that you can recall that came out of speaking to your employees and asking them? Was there anything in particular that people were saying that would really help them improve efficiency? And did you, and we've had a question here to say, did you do the training done by a consultancy? Was it yourself? How was that managed internally? So was it an internal team that did all that?
Yeah, it's an internal team which works with the employees, and I think we kicked off a program, and this is from our leadership, sponsored by our leadership, where we are training our employees on Lean Six Sigma and having those simulations in breakout rooms, so to kind of better understand that what we are talking about and explain them. So that kind of helps us, and also empowering our employees to speak and voice out their opinion. That we need to give that platform so that they are able to speak out, and and it's more of an egoless environment where we need to listen to everyone and see what they bring to the table. So I think it's really important. Everyone plays an equally important role across this journey, right from the leadership to the floor level, because it starts from leadership and the execution happens at floor level. So yeah, I would say that those were the few learnings from this journey.
Yes, I was going to say that's really interesting because I think in this road to achieving OPEX, it isn't a top-down approach, isn't it? You need to have everyone on board working on the same team to the same goals. And obviously, HelloFresh is in a position where you've gone through that process. But I imagine there's lots of our leads today that are in that process and want to start that process. And I think that's a key thing and definitely a theme that we're seeing around basically how can you implement that change? How can you get everyone on board? So you actually touched on Six Sigma there. Have you got any examples or any ways that you can share with us how you've used Lean Six Sigma to kind of get this journey of efficiency and how it reduce costs and become more efficient as a business, I suppose?
Yeah, for sure. So I think talking about Lean Six Sigma methodologies, I think one of the methodologies we implemented was DMAC. So this was related to one of the waste, which is part of the Lean principle, which is overproduction. So overproduction of our product which was leading to a lot of physical waste and financial waste. So this was something which was brought to our attention. So basically, we defined what the problem was, articulated the problem very clearly, that yes, we are overproducing a product by X number, which is leading to X number, X percentage of waste on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, and what is it impacting on a longer term? And it's food basically. So we want to be very careful about how much we produce. So that was a starting point. So that we defined the problem, and then we measured what we had actually with us. So we already had the data of how much are we producing, by what quantity are we overproducing, which is really important to understand that what the gaps were. So I think that is something which helped us understand the data properly and also see that what are the areas of improvement. So once we get to the measuring state, that's where we kind of measure that, okay, what are the challenges, what do we need to improve, and what are the areas of improvement which we need to work on by measuring a set number of metrics basically. So and then we got to the improve phase where we had the gap analysis done, that okay, why are we producing this by X number? What needs to change at not in this function, but the data numbers which are coming from a different team. So talking to them, getting to the root cause of the problem, which is really important for us to understand that where is this actually triggering the problem, and then we had to see that how could we accommodate that in our day-to-day operations to understand that okay, if you're producing X number of a product by Sunday, how much do I need to produce on Monday, and what are those important key factors I need to look into before I start producing something for Monday or Tuesday. So those were the improvement phase, and then the control phase, where you basically need to control and assess that if this is really working out. And we saw almost a 50% reduction in waste, and which also brought down our numbers significantly in terms of week over week donations of these products. So I think yeah, this was one of the great experiences I've ever had working on a project where we implemented this Lean Six Sigma methodology. And I think and the same methodologies could be applied across other functions as well. depending on what kind of problem are we facing and how do you want to approach it. So, and it's something which is not a one-day thing. It isn't. That's why I call it improvement. It needs to carry on day in and day out to see that, and by challenging the status quo, how we can continuously improve the process and make it more efficient for our customers, for our internal customers, basically, for our production teams, and so on and so forth. So I think, it's a long journey. I think I would not say it's a sprint. I think it's a marathon, which is something which we need to look into.
I think that's really, really interesting, because I was going to ask you timelines. Are you aware of what the timelines were with these different phases? How long did that process take? And you mentioned it's something you're continuously looking at. How is that sort of managed? How are you continuously looking at that? And how is that managed to this day forward?
Yeah, so defined phase roughly took about like a week or so to articulate the problem properly and see what we are planning to resolve. And then when we get to the measuring state, I think we already had the data, so we had to do the data analysis, which is about another 2 to 4 weeks to see how much data we have and what exactly it is pointing us towards. And then once we get to the measuring state, that's something which takes time, because we need to give enough time for us to see that what we are trying to solve is actually solvable in that given point in time. So give us that extra buffer time to kind of resolve it. So overall, I would say this was done in over a period of 6 months, since this was just one targeted problem which we were resolving. But if you have one problem which is a combination of multiple problems, then this might just stretch along over a period of time. And I think even today we are measuring this and keeping an eye on how much are we overproducing. I think, which is something which we could significantly improve on. And we have done, as I mentioned, that we've reduced it by 50%. And I think the goal is to reduce it even more as we work on that. So, yeah.
I think that's really interesting as well, because you mentioned it's food. So that's, it's quite a sensitive subject, I suppose, that you don't want to overproduce on that. So it's great that you've managed to reduce that to 50%. And that seems like a huge achievement of just a 6 months trial almost. We've had a question from Carol in the audience who's asked, could you share an example of potentially like a mistake or something that you weren't happy with during this process, and how did you fix it, basically? Did you ever have a problem with the production of anything, or did you have to pull back anything because of customer complaints? Do you have any sort of bumps in the road, I suppose, during this process?
Yeah, so this was as part of OpEx team. I think we, since this was a problem of overproduction, so this was significantly with the production on site. So I think these key stakeholders were production mainly, to understand. So we went back and spoke to them that what exactly is happening and what their process looks like, and why are we overproducing. So I think we got a lot of substantial data from them to work on, and then we would reach out to different teams which are providing those numbers for them to produce those X number of product, right? So this was basically reducing the buffer allocated to these products, basically. So we have buffer allocated based on the demand and forecast. So we had to reduce the buffer levels on each product so that we are only producing what is required, plus 1 or 2% based on what buffer we decided on. So that's how we got to it. And this was more of working in joint collaboration with production, as I mentioned. So being on the floor, talking to the team leads and supervisors to ensure that, yes, we are on track and we are working towards this, and we are actually trying to achieve what we are actually planning to. So those were the few things which we worked upon, and it was really successful.
And I suppose that's where that cross-team collaboration comes in, doesn't it? Having been able to go over and speak to the people in production to put things right if there's been complaints, or if there's a way in which you could do something more efficiently, is having that whole team involved, not having those silos, to really sort of get you on the journey to efficiency. And I know we've discussed quite a lot about Six Sigma. Are there any other methodologies that you guys are using at HelloFresh that you can share with our audience, or any recommendations that you've got in terms of methodologies that people in other sectors potentially could use?
Yeah, so I think you could use A3. I think A3 is one of the other methodologies, and we can use 5 Ys, 5W, 2Hs, and there are a lot of methodologies. I think what we have stuck to is DMAC for now, and this is something which has been working for us. So I think, yeah, there are a lot of other methodologies which we could probably venture out into and solve a lot of problems. I think these are all problem-solving methodologies. So probably a fishbone diagram, the 5 Whys, as I mentioned, the 5 Ws and 2 Hs. So these are some of the key methodologies which others could use potentially based on the problem they're trying to solve.
No, that's great. And a lot of questions we've actually had come in are around with how do you sort of prioritize improvement opportunities? And if you can't potentially, if you haven't got the 3 to 6 months, is there any way that you could sort of advise to shorten that process almost? I know we've mentioned it's a continuous process,
Yeah.
but are there any recommendations from the work that HelloFresh have done?
Yeah, for sure. I think, yeah, I saw one of the questions that 3 to 6 months is a really long time. Of course, I would say it didn't really take 6 months, but then it's a process which goes on forever. Actually, it's not even 6 months, but we were able to resolve. And how do we prioritize? I think that's a very good question. So first thing we have to see how much cost savings do we have there, and then what impact does it have on our physical waste of the product? How much are we donating week over week, and what that number looks like? And second is our operational efficiency. What's the impact of that? So there are a few parameters which HelloFresh has, and where we prioritize our issues or problems, how we want to resolve. So I think the main thing here was it was a physical waste food product. We don't like to waste. I think that's something which actually caught our eyes and attention. And the second thing was the cost associated with it, which was again significantly high. Which actually drove us and influenced us to work on this problem immediately. So I think this was one of the things. The other issues which I could probably relate to is like actual physical waste, where we are not falling FIFO at our DCs, which is resulting in expiry of our products, which ends up getting disposed of. So I think that was the other issues, which that was one of the other problems which we tackled with our DC teams, and I think it was procurement as well. So to understand that, why are we having excessive inventory in our fulfillment center when we don't need it? Because we are disposing this end of the week or end of the month or whatever it is. So I think this was again a joint collaboration with procurement to understand that what are they missing and why are we placing so much order on these particular SKUs, and then DC to understand that why are we not able to FIFO it, what is actually breaking. So these are a few things which takes longer time than we anticipated to, because there are a lot of tools involved in this, which our procurement team might be using it, which might be a little different. The tool limitations also come into picture, where we are not able to get the exact data, which kind of throws us off, and we end up placing the wrong order. So I think there are multiple factors which influence this decision. So that was one of the other problems which resolved, and I think FIFO adherence is really important, because inventory is your business, that is your money. So if you're disposing that, it means you're literally throwing your money off. So I think that was the other product which we handled.
Yeah, I think it's you touched upon a lot of things there in this journey to OPEX, actually how it can have a wide impact on the whole business, really, if you get it right. And people have sort of questioned around if you're using anything around process mining. Have you done anything around process mining? And in regards to, I know you've mentioned a lot about data-driven decisions. Did you have any KPIs set around actually data-driven decisions, or KPIs you mentioned around the waste reduction? Did you set those goals beforehand? How did you come up with how did you measure yourself, as in what's good, what's satisfactory, and what else do we need to do to improve, I suppose?
Yeah, so I think when we are deciding on the KPIs, I think what we're looking at is when we sit with our key stakeholders, we try to understand what are our business overarching goals and objectives, and then what is our priority based on areas of improvement which we have figured out. And then once we have those things ready, the next step is to have KPIs, I think. And for example, for our overproduction of kits, I think we had an X number of percentage, or which was our target given to us, which is a target given to us. But then we took a challenging target by reducing that X by X.5. Or whatever, and then we try to work on that, because we report those numbers on week basis and have those discussions where we have the meetings to discuss that, hey, we are seeing this go up to 1%. Is there a reason why? What are the root causes? What are the 5 whys? Why did we end up doing this? What is actually driving that? I think those are the few things which we question our DC teams to understand that what problems are they actually facing and how can we resolve them. And there are times where they have the solution with them. It's just that they need the way to implement it. So I think that's where we come into picture. When it comes to FIFO adherence, I think we see how many expired products do we dispose of week on week basis in terms of dollar value. So we set a dollar value after having a substantial data to understand that how much are we disposing week over week, and then we have one number where we measure it against. And I think these are meetings where we meet on weekly basis to understand, go over this, so that we are actually seeing the change and we are actually seeing the waste reduction. So I think that plays an important role where we are collaborating and staying connected with all other teams to make sure that this is happening. Because I think when you get to fulfillment center, the DC teams are actually busy in operations, and no one really has time to look into this unless there is someone supporting them on these things. So I think a KPI should be like smart KPIs, like specific, measurable, right, achievable, relevant, and time bound. So of course we want to be very specific in what we want to achieve. Of course we can measure it. It's not something that we cannot measure it. So making sure that we have those KPIs set, which is actually targeting to resolve that issue. And once we do that, we actually close that KPI and move on to the next one, or we take more challenging targets to see how much can we further improve by challenging the status quo and see where we can get at.
Yes, it's aim of sort of having a KPI, hitting it, meeting it, setting it again almost to hit it, meet it, to keep driving that efficiency. Actually, Atul from the audience has asked, did you have an idea of percentages? Like, do you look at what's margin, so what's acceptable, what isn't acceptable in terms of like waste production, for example? Do you have KPIs around that, or is that not something you've done in the journey yet?
Yeah, so we do have KPIs around that, and it's one of our sustainability metrics, which we don't directly work on. I think my role is more in terms of process improvement. So if I'm seeing a particular process is resulting in X number of dollar values, which is like significantly high for our business, then I think my job is to look into the process and see where it is actually breaking down and where can we actually bring that money back to the business. So when we talk about the waste reduction, yes, we do have KPIs, and these are since meal kit business is kind of unique industry, so we kind of look into the industry standards, but then we have these KPIs set over based on what data we have, what historical data we have, and that's how we go about and keep changing it once in a quarter or once half yearly. Just to set more challenging targets for us. So that's how we determine our KPIs and the percentage of
that makes perfect sense, and I'm sure there's lots of takeaways there for those people in our audience that are wanting to set KPIs and wanting to know sort of the best way to go around that. I am just conscious of time, and I know we are coming up to time shortly, but I just wanted to ask if you could give advice to our audience around your experience at HelloFresh, and obviously getting to a point where you've got this 50% reduction in sort of waste that you've mentioned and improving efficiency. If there are kind of like 3 things that you would recommend, maybe to like a startup or someone starting this journey towards OpEx, do you know what they would be? What are the kind of the key things that you think people need to look at or must be looking at or need to be on their radar to sort of start this journey?
I think I would say first thing is communication. I think that is a key factor here. The more you talk to different key stakeholders, the more information you get. The more information you get, the more idea you get about the process or whatever you're planning to fix, right? So I think communication is really important. I think collaborating with different key stakeholders, because you don't want to work in silos and you need to work with like fulfillment teams, procurement, data, logistics, so on and so forth. So I think you should have an open mind to accept ideas and talk to them and brainstorm on different things. You may not have that experience, which even I didn't have experience about a lot of things, but this is something which you get once you start talking and involving yourself. I think that's where you start getting to know about different things which you were not aware of. So I think that's the other thing. And the third thing I would say is just be confident in what you do actually. So know your work really well. I think if you know that you're trying to resolve one particular issue, I think you need to see that what your approach is. I think your approach to problem is really important. And this approach might be really vague in this, but my approach here would be that first, do I have my buy-in from a leadership team if I want to change this? Because that's really important. If I don't have their buy-in and I'm just going on the floor and making these changes, I might see that resistance to change. So I think that's important. The other thing I would say is educating and training our folks on the floor on these proposed changes. Let them know that why are we changing this, what this actually brings to them, and see if they have any questions. I think, as I mentioned earlier, that we need to empower them by giving them the space to voice out their opinions and not have the fear of reprisal where they're not able to speak and they're just in their shell, right? That's very important. And end of the day, it's the team you're working with, which is the team which maybe at fulfillment center, maybe at procurement team. So I think it's very important to have their involvement in decision making as well. So it's not that something I decide that, oh, hey, I want to do this and this is how you're going to do it. It's not only my way. You need to involve them in decision making process and understand that what they see, because they're the ones who are working on the floor, for example, and they know what the complexity is, how the operation runs. Maybe we might have a different perspective, but then they have a complete, total different perspective because they're on the floor, they're working day to day. So I think involving them also makes it's really important, basically, and you basically gain their trust. Like, okay, they are being heard, and which makes them feel really great that yes, I'm being heard. Mm-hmm. My opinions are being considered. So I think that would be the other key factor, which I would say is really important in the continuous improvement journey.
Thank you, and that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing those last key tips. And that actually brings us to time and actually leads us quite nicely into our last session of the day, in which we're joined by representatives from Wells Fargo and Ericsson's to talk about how to encourage cross-team collaboration and break down the silos, which Abhishek has kindly sort of introduced to us in this session. So thank you so much for your time, Abhishek. Your details are all in the lobby. So guys, if you've got any questions, you want to reach out, connect on LinkedIn, please do so. And we will now move on to our final session of the day. So like I say, we're going to be joined by Peter and Joe from Wells Fargo's and Ericsson's, so please do join us in that next session. To log in, just close this window down, and in the lobby it will be the next session, and we will get all the answers to the questions that Abby went through, all typed up and sent over, so you can, and we'll get them emailed over to you. So, and if you've got anything else, feel free to reach out separately. So we're going to move on to our next session now, and we'll see you there in a minute. Thanks, everyone.